And so as you look at these now, I guess we can look at the individual groups and how they're referred to. And then on the right side, it has the members that we have that they see at Hawk Ridge. And so even though we can go through the summer and only see maybe 3 or 4 kinds of raptors at times, because so many of the birds get here, start nesting, they're in the forest, and so it would be interesting to me when I started thinking about it was if everybody, in some respect, went down the list of the names of the birds on the right and just think about how many you've ever seen, or that you know even what they are, or ever even heard of in some cases, because we don't see all of them. I mean, we all know what bald eagles are, you know, I think, even though with bald eagles there's often, many of us know, confusion about whether they're actually seeing a bald eagle or not, right? Is that really a bald eagle? Or up here, so much of the time I get something that's related. The phone's going. Well, these are bald eagles, right? What's wrong with this?
The babies don't have white heads.
Maybe she's right. Babies don't have white heads, do they? So this is kind of a family relic, you know. Lindsay's mother, or grandmother, or somebody, you know, did this needlepoint to make this, but it's the only thing I've seen where they made baby eagles with white heads like adult eagles. And so even though we know what eagles are, you know, once they have young eagles and they start to grow up and they get the size of an adult eagle, then at that point in time they could be anything because they don't have white heads. That's what you're using to identify them, right? And so the common thing up here is people reporting they're seeing golden eagles. Much more often than I'm sure there's golden eagles seen around here, even though it's possible to see one. Since a young eagle, by the time it leaves its nest, is as big as an adult eagle, but without white head, without a white tail, and those things. And people swear that they're bigger than a bald eagle when they see them. And so they're generally, both bald eagles and golden eagles are pretty much the same size. So that even identification of something is easy to identify as an eagle, it seems like, is something, at least in this area and some other areas, can be misidentified. But fortunately, you know, did some of you see the news about the big event? Well, you know the big event because it's 250 years, right, since 1776. So this year, in, you know, recognizing that and recognizing that the bald eagle is our national bird, they had an event at the National Eagle Center just this month, where and it was actually an event where Sibley, who many of you are familiar with, the Sibley field guide of all the birds, was even there for the big weekend event at the National Eagle Center. And part of it was to create a new stamp for the occasion. I can pass them around, you can see those. And you can see on these, all the way from hatchling to adult, you can see what a bald eagle looks like.
Can I ask a question about bald eagles?
Uh-huh.
When do they usually lay their eggs and when do they usually hatch around here?
Okay, that's a good question. I mean, that's a good question for almost all the raptors, because we don't often even see their nests, or you can't. In fact, I was just out with 5th and 6th graders yesterday after school, and we went to an eagle's nest on Fall Lake, the one some of you've been to with me before, and they actually start nesting, and you start seeing them on eagle cams laying eggs and things like in February. Not necessarily up here, but even up here, they nest very early, February, March, they're already nesting. And so by now they've got young in the nests. But we had quite a discussion while we were there. And I think last year when I took maybe some of you, when we went to look, it was about this time. And so we were looking, and right now they've got young eagles in the nests, but the nests are so deep, you know, that they can be in there, and you can't tell if they're in there or not. Or earlier when the females are, you know, incubating eggs and they're in there, you can't see the female on the nest on lots of times to tell if they're really nesting or not. But now they're at a point where they don't really, as we get warmer weather and everything, they don't need to, they're not incubating eggs, they're not on young. All the adults' role is to feed them, right? So they come and they go. So most of the time you don't see an adult around. We didn't see an adult the whole time we were there, and then we were there for an hour and a half. And but I'm sure there had to be a young in that nest, because I saw the adult there just a couple days before. But how soon before that young gets to the point where it's going to want to get up, start exercising, show itself, is going to be sometime later in June, probably. They will fledge or be able to fly in mid-July. So they've got like almost a 6-month period of, you know, from the start of nesting until they fledge young.
Do the parents take equal times? Do the parents both take equal turns feeding the young, or staying with the young? Or
They both feed the young, but they don't stay and guard the nest as the young get bigger. Really, the young aren't that threatened by anything, and so I usually compare them with the other species that people generally know and see up here, because it's large and it's out in the open and you're out fishing and it's fishing, and that's ospreys, and they're nesting right now too. And so I was just at the nest in Babbitt this past week some people know 2 or 3 places where there's osprey nests, and they're generally right out in the open once you know where they are. And so in Babbitt, they happened to be one every year on one of the light poles on the football field at the high school. So there was an adult on the nest. I could see her. I could just barely see her head on the nest. And their young will fledge about a month later than bald eagles. So
like in August? They'll fledge in August?
Yeah. And then with ospreys, especially, they leave almost as soon as the young can fledge and migrate. And they're not around all that long. And so in September, we can talk about that, because if you're another way to get a chance to see raptors you've never seen, and that's why some of these books are just titled Hawk Watching. And what does hawk watching mean? It doesn't mean what we're talking about now. It means they're books that were written for hawk watches. So Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania, or Hawk Ridge at Duluth, or all the other hawk counting places are the places where people really get a chance to watch the hawks that they never get to see hardly at all, any place at all, any place sometimes, because they're in the forest and they're nesting, and they don't have distinctive markings, so if you see something you don't know what it is anyway, that kind of bird. You ever had one of those? But anyway, they're not like warblers. They're very colorful and have colorful patterns and things on them, and songs too. I mean, they're not out there singing either for us. Most of the, they may be calling occasionally. So that's part of the intrigue of them. So that list there is things that, there's pictures around the room. Some people can look at them from a distance and recognize the osprey over there because they've seen ospreys. Some people might be able to look at the birds on the left and recognize them. Somebody recognize them? Even without binoculars? Well, those are peregrine falcons. So, I mean, that's the largest of the falcons, but the falcon probably we see the most often is a kestrel because they're back, they're out, they're perched on the wires along the roadsides, and so we get to see them relatively commonly. The other falcon that we have here regularly and is here now and actively hunting is Merlins, and I don't know how many people know that they've seen a Merlin. How many people know they've seen a Merlin? I mean, they're hunting pigeons in town every day. They're nesting maybe above your cabin or whatever. And so they're a dark-looking, fast-flying bird. And then they're loud when they call, but still, if you didn't know what you were hearing, you wouldn't know that that's what they were. And so, in fact, we have a Merlin. You passed one when you walked in the door. An artist's rendition of a Merlin. So they were, if you have older field guides, the falcons in that group that you're looking at there are all had different names. So if I go back to Audubon paintings of birds as he created things, we have the kestrel, which is a falcon, right? But on this it's called a sparrowhawk. And the Merlin was called a pigeon hawk. And the peregrine falcon was called, duck hawk. So they each had names that were more related to kinds of things. So a Merlin could, what kind of pigeons did it? Maybe probably passenger pigeons. Just like they go after, rock pigeons in towns now. And certainly kestrels, even though they're called sparrowhawks, they probably certainly prey on birds some, but one of the things they're known for preying on, and they've done studies even of them migrating in the fall at Hawk Ridge, they migrate when dragonflies migrate. And so they prey a lot on flying insects. And so that just makes everybody sad, right? We like dragonflies out there eating mosquitoes. Yes, we do. So more dragonflies the better. But anyway, that's just kind of a quick look at some of those things. So this is, and so where do we get our information about birds? Sometimes it's groups like ours. I mean, if we have people posting pictures, posting things, with the number of people we have, we end up finding nests that we wouldn't know were there sometimes, observing birds at nests and see what they do. It's like the osprey we just talked about. What was it, a ball field? And that's one of the things I discovered when I went to Florida for the first time, was that from there. They overwinter down there too, but it seems like when I went to minor league spring training games, every post around the stadium had a osprey nest on it. It seemed like almost. So they were just abundant. But anyway, so that aspect of ospreys makes them quite well known, even though most of the ospreys, and probably the ones from here, don't go to Florida. They probably go to South America. That brings up other questions about how these birds perform during the year. They don't get here until May. A lot of them,
The ospreys?
and even other things, broad-winged hawks, many of these raptors, and then as soon as they're done nesting, they're migrating, and so the peak of the broad-winged hawk migration is mid-September. They're gone by the end of September, pretty much, and so they get up here. They're hunting now, and certainly for females, I've been thinking a lot about females lately. Some of these birds, the males don't have as much of a role as some things. So some birds are essentially mating, and then the female is the one that really has to be feeding as soon as she gets here. She has to be getting the nutrition she needs to be able to produce eggs and hatch young and do all of that aspect of it. It requires more than sperm, and so and fending off other males, that sort of thing. But so anyway, the females are, and then oftentimes the female does a lot of the attending of the nest during the young's development. So well, let's just say that if you were to look for information about raptors, do you have particular ones that you're interested in that you've never seen, or even if you have seen? Does anybody have questions? We already had one question about the time cycle. Where would you find the information you want about the life of any particular one, or where they are? If they're on the list of things that you see there, why have I never seen one?
Where would you find golden, Phil, and where do they migrate to?
Find what?
Golden eagle.
Golden eagles. Well, seems like all of these things, and that's partially what the hawk watches are about, is trying to figure out what we don't know about things. And golden eagles is ones that, since I've been here, I grew up in southern Michigan. I never thought about golden eagles at all. I didn't think about birds much either when I was a kid. But anyway, coming here and even being out east where I was at Hawk Mountain and various places, I realized that there's golden eagles very rarely that are seen in migration. And they're even less common than almost anything else that goes through Hawk Ridge that gets caught. They lure birds in so they can band them. And so if you can't catch them and band them, you may be able to count some occasionally going through, but not very many. So questions of all these hawk counts in various places helps us understand. We can look around the country and see, where are the ones, we know that they're up north, they're across Canada, and so some of them migrate south down through the western states. But, and I didn't know where they were in Canada necessarily, so I always thought that if one showed up here, it probably came from the northwest and somehow got to, like many of the other raptors do. They're not going to cross Lake Superior. They don't want to cross open water. So they would just follow the lake down, and so they'd end up coming through here on their way to wherever they were going. And, but then, and part of it relates to those stamps I passed around to you, because one of my students that came here when I first started teaching is the education director of the National Eagle Center. And so he came here because he was a birder. He's taught elder hostels on birding at Hawk Ridge with me. And after he graduated, he went on and got his degrees, and he volunteered down in the Wabasha area on doing swan watches and things like that, and then the Eagle Center got built. And so he became the education director. He's if you scan the event that they just had down there for the stamp project and signing and everything, you'll see his picture in there. Been trying to get him to come up and bring an eagle up, or come up and talk to graduation or something. But anyway, it's because of him that I end up going down there for things. And the thing I go down every year for is the survey of golden eagles. And so I wouldn't know if it wasn't for that and him and things, probably half of what I know about the ones that migrate down and end up in kind of the Four Corners area down there, Iowa, Illinois, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and that country that's away from the lake. So you've got lots of wintering bald eagles, because there's so much food in the Mississippi and things for them. And there's chicken farms and stuff like that down there. And so, but when I go down for that one-day count, we essentially roam the bluffs, and he's primarily the reason that they have the count, and the realization that you could go, you can locate pairs of golden eagles. And so they're not just individuals, they're pairs. Some are adults, sometimes there's young together with adult. And so they migrate down, and they have very poor luck trying to band them, because you can't catch them hardly, trap them or whatever, but they have had enough ones that they could get transmitters on and follow their pattern, and they find that they're not just coming from the northwest, they're coming from just the north, up around Hudson Bay on either side. And they're not only coming to the Midwest and that area that I just described in this region, but they're also coming down the East Coast and wintering, in the mountains in states like New York or other places down along the coast. So, or not along the coast, but inland. And so as a result, then you start wondering, well, we're going to go someplace. They're going to go someplace where there's food. So what do they eat? So what would you eat if you were a golden eagle in
Small mammals.
Wabasha? What would you hunt for?
Small mammals.
Hmm?
Small mammals.
Small mammals? Could be small.
Could be large.
They could be something.
Oh, I know what they eat.
They could be something
I've
that's not a
seen this.
mammal too.
In eastern Washington, when the cows have their babies, they eat the afterbirth.
Okay.
I've seen that. Like a whole bunch of golden eagles will go there, yeah. It's kind of a weird
There's
thing,
another
but
big thing that's not a mammal.
Turkey?
Huh?
A turkey?
Turkeys.
they eat turkeys.
So on the bluff tops, they have the bluff tops are, what they call them, goat pastures or something. In the old days, people would have things like that up on the hills and stuff. But anyway, they forested tops. So the reason I love going on the counts partially is it's just like we do Christmas bird counts here. I have an area that is given to me for the day, or whoever's with me. And so we just spend all day traveling the roads up these valleys and to the bluff tops and back down again. And so it's such a different landscape than this that is just fun just to be out in it. And, you know, no matter where you are.
I'm just dying to add New Jersey on the Delaware River for the sightings.
Yeah.
And they've been so excited about it. You know, coming back actually from not having it.
Back from that.
Yeah.
The golden eagles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so anyway,
Bald eagle as well.
out there, we still have to identify the difference between a bald eagle and a golden eagle.
Yeah.
And actually, we count all the raptors that we see. Actually, almost all the birds I usually report that I find that are wintering there. But the aspect of the golden eagles is they have, a pair will have a specific spot. So he essentially gives me a map of where I'm going each year. Sometimes it's the same area, but essentially he'll mark the locations, the places in those valleys or the bluff tops where I should expect to, I should pay special attention. It usually proves to be true. And so then it's just a question of, are they sitting on a branch up there, the trees kind of overhanging the open space below, you know, watching, or, you know, it depends on whether a lot of things, but, or are they soaring, you know, when the conditions are right, and things like turkeys, but it could be small mammals, could be rabbits, could be squirrels, whatever's out in the open, they can come around a bluff top or off from the forest and surprise prey that are out in the open. But turkeys are a big, you know, provide a lot of food, I guess, if you get a turkey. So that's, again, it's like, I get excited about any species you name on the list, because the question is then, how do you find out what their story is, or what their life is, or where they are, or why they're there, and when are they there, and all of those things. And actually, the golden eagle participation in that is growing. They're into the middle of Minnesota, farther into Wisconsin, the Dells area. And so there's, I think, realization as this goes on of people discovering that there's more golden eagles wintering than we ever probably even realized.
Bill, have you ever seen one here in England?
I did see one.
You have?
I mean, I think I saw one just outside of town at one point in time, but I'm awfully cautious, you know, and so, I mean, they're, like I said, if they go through Hawk Ridge at all, they're going to go through this region occasionally. So it's hard to tell a person, well, you could see a golden eagle. Well, they could, but it's not because it's too big to be a small eagle, or a bald eagle. So,
I was just recalling, I think it was in 2019 Christmas bird count that one was sighted in the Isabella area in the wintertime, you know?
yeah. And so, yeah, I mean, in some places, people could have small animals or things they might be able to carry on, or we have squirrels. But, you know, then that question becomes, you know, a lot of these books, and I'm just going to talk about them kind of in groups. Like I said, some of them are all titled hawks. So they're really just a guide that, no matter what the hawk is, or even vultures or other things they're distinguishing from, or eagles, they just include them all. So, I mean, they're all raptors in that definition, but there are many of them, and many of these, like this one in particular, many of these pictures are taken from Hawk Ridge. So when you go to Hawk Ridge, everybody stands out there and you're watching for kettles. So, you know, everybody know kettles? So so much of it is the dynamics of the place. And so when you've got the right temperature, got sun, and temperatures, and the wind is appropriate, essentially, anytime you've got sun on a ridge top, or a road, or a parking lot, or whatever, you're gonna get a thermal. So it's gonna heat up that open surface faster than the wooded surface around it. And so you'll get air moving in and up, right? And that rising air that's heated and goes up, well, how high will it go? Well, it'll go until it's cool. It gets cooled down and there's no more rising going on. So the thermal goes up, 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 up. And so this is especially true for broadwing hawks. And I'll just tell you, if you don't already know that, that's what Hawk Ridge is known for, is broadwing hawks. And that's as we see them right now along our roadsides hunting. It's probably our most abundant forest hawk that we have around here. That hunt the roadsides and hunt the lake shores and all of that. And so there's lots of people who have stories of their experiences with broadwing hawks. Occasionally, even some will even stay all winter. But for the most part, they're going to South America. And so when September begins, they're going to, we can just pass some of these around. These books, if you want to have them floating around. And they can be any of these, because they all got wrappers in them. These are all titled Birds of Prey. So it's just another option instead of calling them hawk guides. And this one, these are hawk watching guides, which are again the same thing almost. But this is one that's made specifically to see things that are in migration. So almost all the illustrations of them are looking at their underside because they're flying over you or they're riding up on a thermal or something. And so with your binoculars, you're looking at what you can see on the underside of the hawk. You can see the size of the tail, size of the head, relation to kind of the proportions. The Buteos, that's what this is. This is a red-shouldered hawk, which is very much like a broad-winged hawk. They have relatively broad, short wings, wide surfaces between that and their tails, so they're not flapping their way to Mexico or South America. What they're doing is they're riding a thermal up. It breaks down. Then what do? Gravity allows you, and maybe even a good wind direction, to take you a long ways, whichever way, to get where you want to go. Till you hit it, and you'll go down some because you've got weight, and then you'll catch another thermal and ride your way up. And so you're just doing like an elevator trip to some extent, a downhill run. And so there's even been questions about whether broad-winged hawks even feed or not between here and Mexico. And I say Mexico because we can see when we get the biggest counts at Hawk Ridge. They have their Hawk Ridge weekend in the middle of September when there's the potential for the biggest movement of broad-winged hawks. And so when they get their biggest days here, when's going to be the biggest days of the counts as they go around the Gulf? And so that's really what you're watching, is either from here or farther west, even some moving south, but from here they're going around the Gulf because you're not going over the Gulf. And so it's an interesting thing to go on the internet and just follow the hawk count numbers and see, based on the wind direction, based on the temperatures. Sometimes there's not that many going through Duluth, but because of the winds and things, if you go and check the metro area just outside of Detroit by Lake Huron, the wind's pushing them towards the Lake Huron area, and they don't want to cross the lake there either, so they can cross the Detroit River and come across that way, so you'll see really big counts coming on one side or the other of the Great Lakes as they go south. And then if you look at other, so we're just talking about one kind of hawks. This would be true for eagles, rough-legged hawks. Essentially on your list there, the buteos are the ones that have the broad wings and short tails and migrate in that fashion, whereas falcons are strong flyers. They can flap their way south to some extent. You don't see them too much kettling. And the same thing with the accipiters, which is the other hawk that is probably the one up here, that group. I know I follow Richard because he's always got Cooper's hawks in his backyard when he's here in the summer, seems like. Not in your backyard, but nearby. And when I go to the state fair, I go down to the bird booth down there. We used to have a picture of some of the raptors on the wall behind the booth, and people would come up and they'd look at the hawks on it, and they would always point at the same one, Cooper's hawk. So the sharp-shinned is the smallest of the accipiters, and Cooper's hawk, and goshawk. So sharp-shinned hawks are preying on small birds and things of that sort. Cooper's hawks are preying on a little bigger. They're adapted to hunting in the woods. They can have short wings, long tails. They can go through the trees, and they can catch birds. And so, goshawks, of course, are large, and so they can catch grouse, even bigger birds. So those are all ones that we have here, but we see them very little because they nest in the forest, they hunt in the forest, they're in the forest. And so you know it. You already figured that out, didn't you, about Richard? He's out there in the forest poking around, and the people down in the cities, you know, what is there for them to eat in the cities? Why would they see Cooper's hawks all the time in their backyard?
Gray squirrels.
Huh?
Gray squirrels.
Could be mammals, could be pigeons, mourning doves, birds. They're really bird hawks. So
The accipiters are?
huh?
The accipiters are bird hawks?
Yeah, bird hunters. Whereas the buteos are more mammal hunters. Or when you talk about a broad-winged hawk, it's relatively small, and they're hunting the roadsides and ditches because they hunt amphibians and reptiles quite a bit. So they're hunting garter snakes, frogs, things like that in the spring. Even some people, I learned that when I was here from one of my Gary Johnsrud, maybe some people remember, used to be here, fished a lot. And so he told me stories about fishing along Shagawa and casting along the shoreline and having barred owls come out and try to grab his surface lures. And or if he threw bait fish out, they would come and grab them. And so they were, and if he tried to stop feeding them and move, they would just follow him along the shore.
What bird was that did that?
Broadwing
Oh,
hawks.
the broadwing. Okay.
And they will winter here sometimes. They're eating small mammals. They have kind of a varied diet, but it's small. But really, when they come back right now, that's where I've seen them every time I go anywhere. Just about in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's been a broadwing hawk on a wire over the ditches on the roadsides. So it could be small mammals. It's also very likely that it's amphibians.
So what puts them in these categories? Their beaks, their talons,
They're raptors because of their beaks and their talons. I mean, they're a bird, that's why they're a bird of prey. And that's what they're referred to. So they all have those things. It's really the proportion. When you look at the accipiters, they have relatively short wings and not real broad wings and a long tail. And so if you're in be flying at full speed through a forest and things, that's kind of the tools you need to be able to pursue something, you know, and maneuver on your way through. And so, because of their design, they have, their wings are short and a little bit broad, certainly broader than a falcon, right?
Right.
Falcon wings are narrow and long and well pointed at the end. But they can, sharp-shinned hawks can also ride kettles up, Cooper's hawks, and those sorts of things. But they're really able, if the wind's not good and there's no kettles, they'll flap their way south. So if you want tips on going to Hawk Ridge, I would say it's always worth going almost, unless it's raining and nothing's moving at all. But I think the charm of Hawk Ridge is that figuring out how they use the ridge also, because we talked about the thermals that can be generated, but what else happens on a ridge? If you're out on a ridge and it's a windy day, the wind's coming from one direction or another, right? And what does it do when it hits the ridge? It goes up, so it's providing lift. If there's no thermals, you're flying low, and so if you go to the very northeast end of the ridge there, and there's trails up on the ridge, and so there's a place, and I showed you that book I told you that a lot of the pictures were taken from. Well, that could have been, that was, in some respects, the location for taking those pictures was at times a little bit of a war zone. It's a great place to walk out to, and on a day when there's no thermals and you're at the tip of that ridge and the wind's coming towards you, or even from the sides and hitting the ridge, you'll see birds coming below you right over the treetops, and when they get to the ridge, they'll come right by the ridge. They'll pick up the wind updrafts along the edge of the ridge and keep going. And so they're still getting lift from that, and they can have the ability to flap as much as they need to, but they got the lift that keeps them going. And so where would you want to be with a camera? Or where would you want to be if you were a bird watcher? And what if both the people with the cameras and the bird watchers wanted to be there at the same time? And so I had friends that would come and bring their lunch, all ready to watch birds all day, and get into altercations with photographers who wanted to take pictures all day. And so it's an interesting place to walk out to. But it's you're also learning. You got the lake and the downhill side of the ridge on one side. You've got a big valley, and then higher ridges, hills off in the distance on the other side. So you've got things that kind of can be moving, and you can see in all directions from out there. And compared to a day when you've got thermals, which could end up with thousands of hawks migrating. If you're out on the ridge watching, there at Washington, the place where everybody gathers, but they're going to be so high that you can barely see them. So that's when you asked, how can you tell from these pictures? Well, that's still, I mean, that's what you learn when you're there, because either you're finding them, or the wonderful thing about Hawk Ridge, and it's about the only place that you've got the numbers of birds to look at. But when I first went there was Kim Eckert, who's written a lot of the books and led tours all over and still does all of that. But he was like, I believe, almost the only employee out there. So that means he was counting, he was showing people birds, he was, answering questions, he was, posting the tallies as they went along. doing all of those things. And so there was a point in time, I don't know what year it was exactly, but I know a woman that came and started coordinating volunteers. And in today's world, they still don't have a visitor center up there, but they've got people there. And I've known a number of young people that started even after, right out of high school, and they went to UMD in college and studied birds, and they worked there or volunteered there, both banding birds and doing other things. But the fact that when you go there and you're standing out there and you've never been there before, you have no idea what you're doing or looking at, and you've got enthusiastic people that are, you know, seeing, pointing out, drawing your attention to, explaining what you should be looking for, all of those things. It's what really makes that place work. I mean, if it wasn't for the great volunteers they have, huh?
I just need to clarify something again for myself, because right away when we're talking, I've been to Hawk Mountain in Pennsylvania, but that's not what you're talking about. Is there a Hawk Mountain here?
Yeah, it's
Hawk
like,
Ridge.
yeah,
It's not Hawk Mountain then?
no, I've been to Hawk Mountain once.
And Cape May?
And I've been to Cape May once.
Yeah,
I've been to Hook Mountain once in New York.
okay.
And that was the first place I think I ever went to a hawk watch, because that was before I moved to Ely.
Yeah.
And that was my introduction to going to a hawk watching site. So it was a long hike up a trail
And the
to
mountain?
get to the observation place at Hook Mountain.
Oh, in Hook Mountain, okay.
And when I got there, there was 3 or 4 people there counting.
Yeah.
And they didn't look like they were interested in having anybody join them. And it seemed like it was, you know, almost, to me at the time, it seemed like it was kind of almost a competition to see who could see something special first, you know. And so that was the nature of what was there. I didn't have any interaction at all, me and my friend that went up there, with the people who were counting. And so it wasn't like, well, Hawk Mountain, as you know, they have a visitor center there. They have a building
then when you
and
talk
things
about
when you
it.
get there. And Cape May is entirely different, and so is, I've been to the Metro one I talked to you about on the other side of Detroit there, coming out of Lake Huron going into the Troy River. And that's kind of like Cape May, where the birds are coming along the coast and at times coming across right over the shoreline, and kind of a shoreline point. And so you've got water going in on one side of you and the ocean on the other side of you at Cape May, I think, as I recall. And so again, it's the wind direction and things, and it's birds moving down along the coast. And I don't know what the dynamics are in terms of their species and feeding makeup and that sort of thing, but I know Hawk Mountain is also known for its broad-winged hawk migration, just the farther east in terms of when they come through.
I read a book about Hawk Mountain originally,
Pennsylvania.
yes, where it originally was where people would shoot hawks.
And Hawk Ridge was too.
Oh, my heavens.
And then a bunch of conservationists got together and decided to protect it from the hunting.
Yeah, and that really was the start in the early 1900s of a lot of even the Christmas bird counts. You know, when the Migratory Bird Act was passed protecting migratory birds, so you really couldn't shoot non-game birds anymore to begin with, but places like Hawk Ridge even, they had, it was really the start of Minnesota's birding organization in the state, which is at the university. So this is the list of all of Minnesota's birds. So this is the keepers of the records for all of the birds that Minnesota has. So the birds that we see and report, and things that get on the record and are accepted, like from Christmas bird counts and everything. They go on this list of known birds of Minnesota. And if you don't have a picture of them, you need to have something to convince that panel to accept your report. So this is just a little information piece that the Minnesota Ornithology Union put out, and I brought it because it's got a raptor on it. Nice picture of one.
What is this on here?
But they,
Kestrel.
but in
Oh,
in
it's
Minnesota and at Hawk Ridge, they had a group that formed, and that's when they designated that area, and the city turned it over to them. And so over the years, they changed bird shooting to bird counting, and so it's got a long history. But you have an abundance. I can pass all of these things around, and you can look at them. Some things like this are pretty handy. Shows again the same species names. They're grouped together with the kites and the vultures and the various things. They're not named, I don't think, buteos and accipiters and things. They're just given their common names. But they show them in flight and perched, and they have a whole panel that's raptors in flight. So, you know, it's a learning process to you know, it's partially behavior, it's partially other things, but things like the broad-winged hawk, and you can see it in the pictures on this, and then the other books that you've got. It's got a black and white banded tail, and so when it's flying and soaring, it fans its tail out. It's very distinct black and white bands, heavy bands. And so right now, when you're driving along 169 or wherever, and there's a hawk perched on the wire, I've posted some of them in the articles I've written in the paper recently. You know, the one thing you'll see on a broad-winged hawk is they'll look almost nondescript, except you'll see the black and white band, the tail hanging down, which is a very good distinctive thing. And then the other challenge for them is to determine whether they're adults or immatures. And so when you look at the pictures of a broad-winged hawk, color pictures of things, you'll see a broad-winged hawk adult has kind of a reddish breast, whereas an immature has streaks that come down. So it's black, essentially black and white. It's just a streaky breast. So in the fall, you've got birds that are either adults or immatures, first-year birds, kind of, that are coming through. And that's true of the accipiters also. They end up having a reddish-colored breast, sharp shins, and nose. In fact, that bird there is also a bird that you can identify, maybe. Long tail, right? Not a reddish breast, a streaked breast, so it's an immature bird. And it's got a relatively rounded head, small head. And so this is a sharp-shinned hawk, the smallest of the accipiters. And if it was a Cooper's hawk, the head would be broader across the top, more squared off on the back and things. And so that's one way to tell it. And then when they're in flight, they talk about, with accipiters, birds flap and glide when they fly. So it's like flap, 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 glide. Flap, 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 glide. You know, and so with a sharp-shinned hawk as compared to a Cooper's hawk, what is it? What's the flap like? Snappy, they often
Oh,
say.
snappy.
Snappy. It's really,
Cooper's is more
sharp,
snappy?
quick, snappy flaps. Whereas on a Cooper's hawk, it's, slower flaps.
Which
And
one's the
Goss-
snappy one?
The smallest one, which is the sharp-shinned hawk.
Okay.
And so not only can you recognize it as by its shape and things like that, but the nature of its flying. And then we don't see goshawks that much when we're at Hawk Ridge. I've had experiences when they used to do it more when they would just take people back into the banding station and you could watch them band birds. And so much of the banding of birds is done by jigging for hawks, I call it. Essentially, you're trying to lure a bird in, and when it comes flying in, there's a net in between the bird and the bait. And so as they come flying in to catch the bird that you're jigging, which is usually a pigeon or a starling, then they'll get caught in the net. And then so once you catch them in the net, then you can put a band on them, and then you've got the record, and you have lots and lots and lots of records of birds that get caught trying to catch birds when they're migrating. And so it's something to, when you used to be able to go into those bands, and some of those pictures that are over there, or these ones up here, where there's all birds in hand, these are all ones that were caught where they're banding birds. So it's a red-tailed hawk. This is an adult sharp-shinned hawk up close. So we got osprey. We've got a number of things here. We got a golden eagle, actually. Like I said, they have caught golden eagles. This is a red-tailed hawk. Looking at the underside of it, but in all of those cases, some banders are sitting in a blind. They're watching the horizon just like people that are counting hawks out at the ridge to see what's coming. And when they see birds coming anywhere in the distance, they start jigging. And so they have a line that goes out and goes down behind the nets, and it's got a harness on a pigeon or a starling. And so all I have to do is lift that bird off the ground, and it'll start flapping. So that's the attractant. And so then if it gets the migrating bird's attention, then the bird comes. You'll see the bird just starting to set its course towards the net, towards the prey, until it flies into the net and gets tangled up, and they run out and take it out and put a band on it and let it go again.
Oh, gee.
And so it's the way we've known so much about the time frame of and locations of where these birds have traveled over time. So, like I said, they used to, you could just, they would just regularly take a group of people back, and they could sit they had a blind right behind that net, and so you could sit there and watch the whole thing happen, and the banders would be in a different blind with their jigging equipment, and so that's how they operated. But it becomes like anything else we do when we experience, the thoughts come back to you, and I remember more than anything else I ever saw in those situations was a goshawk. And so when that was coming and they were jigging, and I was sitting there with my binoculars watching this goshawk, and it was like it was going to fly right into me, right? Just thinking, well, what's it like to be a predator, a prey? Because I mean, it's just like, I don't know how allowed to say it, but
Unsettled.
it's like it's gonna hit you if it doesn't hit something. It seems like it's coming right at you. But, and it's big, so that's the thing about a northern goshawk. But northern goshawks will prey on birds, but they'll also prey on snowshoe hares, a variety of things that are northern accipiter that's a large hawk. So.
Bill, can you go through the process of what you do if you find a hawk or other bird injured?
Yeah, that's been, it just, well, it's coming up with a number of things. Sherry talks about it a lot with loons. Over the years, I've here, maybe you have too, people called and they've got an injured bird. It could be, sometimes it's been an eagle on the shoreline at the old Fall Lake Resort or something, it got in the water and got to shore, or something like that, or an owl that hit a car on the highway or something and is injured. And so, and it's changed somewhat. I mean, one of the things we have here is Chip Hansen in a fantastic vet clinic. And so, there was a time when that's primarily where we went with what we had. If somebody called me and there was a bird like that, a raptor, for example, something large, I would go and get it. My daughter called me once, saw a great owl got hit by a car or something, and she watched somebody come by and kick it out of the road. And so she called me, but anyway, but the big thing is, no matter what size they are, really the dangerous part of the whole thing is not the beak, it's the talons. You don't want the talons to get anywhere near where they can, grab on. And so I would just always usually take something big, like a big blanket or a big whatever, and throw it over them, and then you can get it around their body and get them into a box or get them into something. And so that's true of, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there's been a friend that's been watching trumpeter swan on Burnside.
I saw that
Huh?
swan. I saw that swan.
Did you see it?
Is it hurt?
It was an immature, well, we didn't know. It's like every day she walked, and that would see it. And then if it didn't seem to fly, it was often up on shore, or sometimes it looked like it was using a dock. There's no other swans around it. She didn't ever see it feeding. And so it was a question of whether it was healthy or not, or had any problems. So, and then it wasn't in the same location. And then it was in a different location by Minister Bay. And so I haven't heard anything lately. We called, the process that changed has been to contact, we have wildlife rehab people. Heather was known by Babbitt. And so she's been here for quite a while. So it kind of changed from the vet clinic not wanting to be the initial, they got enough work to do and things. And they're out of business. And so we would call Heather and get her to her. And then from that, she could do an evaluation of them to some degree, or give them fluids to, could be dehydrated or whatever. And then she had contact with people in Duluth and in the Twin Cities. And if it was a raptor, it could be the Raptor Center, would be its destination. If it was a dead bird, even, which we just had a dead loon that was washed up just a couple weeks ago, and Sherry posted somebody, but I have it in my freezer. And so the Eagle Farm and Balloon Center now, they have some funding, and so what we've developed over time is at the University of Minnesota, they will do necropsies of some things like these, because we would like to know if it's a loon or an eagle or one of the birds that could be lead poisoning, could be various things, that would cause the problem.
Me again. Where would I find Heather? How would I get in touch with her?
Well, I can give you her number, or you can just, they have rehab people that are certified throughout the state. So if you just search for wildlife rehab, people who name, the first name's Heather, I can't think of her last name right now, but she lives in Babbitt. So there was a second person here, but I don't think that person's here anymore. But
So
anyway.
wildlife rehab just for the state of Minnesota?
Yep.
Okay.
And Heather is, and even with the swan, she has already got experience, and actually Sherry does too, and some of the conservation officers. I called, when we heard about the swan, I called Heather and I called the conservation officer just to let him know. And that was there, and if he had any instructions he could give them. Otherwise, he's familiar with working with Heather and Sherry if it's a loon or various things. So, but Heather said she had gone out the boat and caught injured swans before. They're actually easier than loons. So, but we haven't done that yet with that one, and so it's kind of, maybe it's okay. We don't know really. So.
How old do the raptors live, do you know? I'm sure it's different for all of them, but like what age, how old do they live? Like eagles
Eagles
and
will
hawks and all, you know, is it?
A lot of them, of course, the smaller they are, the less longevity they have in general. I'm sure that there's some illegal shooting of hawks probably still happens, but still, they're not long lived. I would say the smaller ones are probably 5 or 6 years if they're doing well. I mean, they're dependent on food, winters, a lot of different things. A number of people, I don't know if any of you have, but people often have experiences with raptors in the winter up here. Over the years, one of the ones that seemed to sometimes stay and have the hardest time on really cold winters, which maybe we haven't had that so much, but is barred owls. It seemed like when I was, first few years I was up here, it wasn't uncommon at all till in January and February when we got those long stretches of sub 20 below temperatures. They would often move to some place where they could have a better time finding food, and sometimes that was under a bird feeder or by a wood pile. So around your house somewhere you might have a barred owl that was just hanging out. So, but they're theoretically they're going to find food, or they're not generally. So I just know one fellow that worked for the DNR that was trapping mice in his house, and he thought, well, he had mice in the trap, and so he could just take a dead mouse and provide it to the barred owl that was hanging out near his bird feeder. So he wasn't sure how to get the mouse to it. So he was a fisherman. I think he was a fisheries person actually, and so he tied it to the end of a fishing line, broke the mouse's leg, so it was just, it was dead.
Yeah.
Just skin tissue. So he could cast it, and he figured that the owl would grab it and take it. And so it did grab it, but it wasn't, the skin was stronger than he thought, I guess, because it started to fly away with it and just spun it right around when it got to the end of the line. So then he got it back, and then the rest of the story was instead of just taking a frozen mouse, he thought he would just put it in the microwave a little, soften it up. So that worked better. That's one way of trying to provide assistance to a wintering bird that might be in trouble.
Getting hungry now.
If we go back to everything we've talked about, the summary of all of this is, like I said, everything has a story. And it seems like every story that whether I've talked about golden eagles or whatever it happens to be, and whatever time of year it is, it's all about food. Just like my dog, you know, it's all about food. And so if I'm trying to interpret what's going on, you know, the question is, you know, what's the habitat they need to be in? What kind of food resources are going to be in that habitat? What are they designed to catch? And how do they do it? And what do they do in different times of the year? And the research that goes on, it just seems like keeps adding to the story. And I brought some things that I haven't shown you. Those, Ben's Life Histories. So if you're interested in more than, or not even interested in learning how to identify everything, but you have a bird of interest, like one bird that I haven't mentioned at all is the northern harrier, which I find to be a fascinating bird up here. And it migrates later in the fall in the Hawk Ridge. And one of my, being the naturalist person that I am, is there's a woman, anybody ever heard of Frances Hammerstrom? She's from Wisconsin and worked in wildlife and wrote things. And so she wrote Harrier, Hawk of the Marshes. And it says down here, the hawk that is ruled by a mouse. So there it goes back to food, right? But anyway, they live in open, grassy areas, and so I've seen them go after things like sharp-tailed grouse when we used to go and sit in blinds over by Cook and watch sharp-tailed grouse dance in the spring, and the whole behavior of the grouse and the behavior of the harriers and everything and the habitat all kind of, you know, come together in that world. And so it was just a fascinating book to read. And what this is showing is the female will have a nest out in a field, and the male will hunt, and she will stay on the nest, you know, on eggs or with young when they're really small. And when he catches something, he's doing this aerial exchange. So he'll fly over the nest and she'll come up and he'll drop it and she'll grab it and take it down to the nest. So, I mean, it's a story. It's the story of how they live. And so I love the book. I mean, it's very readable. It's partially about her life, but it's also about the birds that she was studying and researching and providing habitat for, if it's wildlife management areas and all this sort of thing. But the thing that, would you believe that just after I had read this book, I was in Michigan at the time, I was driving down the road and I saw a male harrier flying across. And so I stopped and tried to follow where it was going based on what I knew now. And so I walked out into the field and walked right to the nest. And so when I got out there, there was this open patch of ground, you know, grass all around it, but you know, a beaten down area where she had the nest, and it was ringed by young harriers sitting there looking at me. So anyway, and so Ben's Life Histories, which exists for all kinds of birds really, but there's 2 volumes on predators. These are from like the early 1900s accounts that were accumulated when we didn't have the research techniques we have today. But it's just interesting to see some of the individual reports on any species that, you know, are real life stories kind of observations. So it's one of those things that I think make, for people that do journals or write their experiences or whatever, it just makes you realize how valuable that is, even personally, for a person to be able to go back and reread what you experienced. So yesterday when we took the kids out, we we actually did our first field trip to the World Fall Lake Resort to the Eagle's Nest. And we saw some other birds, and we used Merlin, and they discovered how that worked and things. But we wrote down the location of where we went, what lake it was that they were on, so their place that they were in, took all the participants' names. They remembered what they saw, or we discovered with Merlin, and we made the list from that. And so they essentially created an outing experience from it, and took pictures of the nest and didn't see it. Well, one of the kids really thought she saw some movement within the branches. We never really saw a head pop up, so.
Oh, well.
So anyway, that's kind of going to be the protocol for, as we visit, we're going to be visiting places predominantly, but places that have opportunities to see some of these things.
I just have to pin me down about this, because you were telling me about that trip, but I wouldn't have been able to go. I'd kind of thought about it, but you'll publish on emails or something about when you go, and our, kind of tag along people welcome to go?
Yeah, in
With
general,
Yeah.
I'm trying to get through this really busy period where I've had medical appointments and
Oh, yeah.
all these things going on at the same time, and I'm going to a wedding in New York and things, but hopefully summer's going to slow down a little bit at some point.
Okay, but you'll let us know.
Yeah, I'll let you know. And we'll have some field trips just for us, so.
Okay,
But,
I like the kid thing.
and there are some young kids that are, and there's other photographers. I mean, we see it because people might post pictures and things from things that we all, value because we know what's going on, or we discover new things. But I've just talked to a couple of other people. I had my eyes checked. Turns out that Bremen,
Yeah, remember.
well, he loves to talk about birds and wildlife, and so he's like showing me on his phone. He's apparently got coyotes, which I don't know anybody else who has as much coyote action as he seems to have around his place. It's not that far from the bear center either. Longsdorf Creek is where he lives, and so he's, where I'm used to people having boxes or bears that show up, but he's got all kinds of coyote pictures and things. And another person that I know also takes lots of photos and things, but I said, what do you do with them? And he doesn't do anything with them. So if you want to use them at all, so I think some of them are going to wander into my articles because, just another person's stories of his experiences that are things that we don't all have, right?
I once saw an eagle catch a duck.
A duck?
Yeah, poor Mallard, it didn't even know. It just came from behind it, and it just easily went and grabbed it and flew away.
Did the duck quack as it was going?
No.
I've heard when, not that kind of a situation, but
You heard him
a smaller
quack when they-
thing being picked up, and you can hear the sound, making the sound. It's a tearjerker, isn't it? Yeah.
Besides showing me his coyotes, he also showed me his snapping turtle pictures, and I have some that I just had too. Snapping turtle crossing the road, a big snapping turtle. And so in his case, he said he watched it and watched where it went and stopped. And that was it for the day, kind of. And then he went back to the same spot the next day. And what was there was all these ravens flew up, which suggests that it's probably watched laying its eggs, and the ravens had a meal.
How would they attack a turtle?
Huh?
How would the ravens attack a turtle?
I don't think they would. I think
Oh,
they'd wait
they got
until
the eggs.
it was done, and then they would go after them.
They're very small.
It's just like just like raccoons and other things digging up eggs from turtles
I
and
see,
things after
they're
they
eating
lay them,
eggs,
so.
not the turtle, got it.
I just thought maybe if the turtle laid the eggs during the daytime, maybe you should have laid them at night, at least. So it couldn't be watched, but I don't know.
You gotta make a note about that.
Huh?
You gotta put a note in the woods.
Yeah. And this spring was a really strange spring, I thought, from garter snake world, at least in my experience. I watched the place for them all spring, and it seemed like our spring this year was those days that got up to 50s only once or twice a week, and that was it. And then every night was down around freezing, and frost wasn't going out of the ground. So I watched this every warm day to see what the snakes were doing. And a few would come out, mostly males, and just kind of hang out, warm up, I guess. I only saw what I thought was a female once, and I think she only had a couple of males trying to mate with her. Where usually when you have a stretch of really warm days and you get a mass of males and females all trying to mate at once. And so that never happened this spring. So I wonder if there's a window, and then if they don't mate by that time, they disperse anyway, and so they just miss out on the
You
years.
never saw the big groups come out. You never saw them come out in a big group.
You've never seen it?
You never saw that this spring.
I didn't see it this year, but I've seen it.
Oh, yeah, other years, but isn't it funny that, I mean, you'd think you'd still see them come out, but they, you know.
This day came, when they did come out, it was like barely, I usually do 50 as a marker, and it has to get up in the 50s, but then, I don't know how deep down in the ground they are, or any of those things, but I don't know what it takes to really get them elevated to a point where they're gonna enthusiastically mate. I don't know, whatever, because it only happens then before they disperse. So,
But we've got a Baltimore Oriole in our yard this year, and it's hung around for about 3 days on both sides of us. How long do they usually hang around? It's a pleasure to have it there.
Well, they nest here.
Yeah.
They don't hang around most people don't try to feed them for very long, but it's like scarlet tanagers we're seeing this spring, and so some of these, and even rose-breasted grosbeaks, they're more abundant up there.
There are a lot of them,
But scarlet cardinals, we have cardinals, very few. So unless you're in a place where you either recognize them when you hear them, but especially with orioles, the ones I saw used to be down at Seymour's Park, along those big willows on the shoreline. And they used to be by the ponds in Babbitt along the shoreline of Hay Lake there and those things by the conservation area. So I think they want to be someplace like that because probably there's food.
They were in the willows along the river.
Mhm.
They went from to our neighbor.
So, but you got that whole,
Yeah.
lots of river and lots of willows, and so
Yeah.
they could be nesting.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, we hear them, it's kind of cool.
Distinct.
so when you go for walks, take Merlin.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll find them at their nest location if they've got one
That'd
they've
be
liked
cool.
or something. I don't know. So I suppose we ought to wrap it up. Somebody asked me how long this is going to take. I didn't know. Thanks for coming. I'm glad all of you came. And if there's any
Thanks,
other
Bill.
things- Huh?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank you, Bill.
Thanks so much.
Real quick.
Oh, we're gonna clap real hard? Come
Yeah.
on, guys.
That place in Babbitt is called the Crippled Critter Ranch. And it's, so if you do find a crippled critter, I've done this before, and I used to take it to the vet where I had a big blanket in the back of my truck, and I'd throw it over and then bring it to the vet, but that'd do the same thing. So,
Even the vet now, they have, one of the people that's at the vet clinic has worked at the U, and so, if it hadn't been they were so busy at the vet, she probably would have done the necropsy because she assisted with them at the U, but before that happened, we found somebody that was going to the city, so they took it to the U. And like I said, the Eagle Center's got some funding, or not the Eagle Center, the Balloon Center, some funding for those things, for the, pay the university to do the necropsy and that sort of thing, so it's made it easier for us to get that kind of effort. And I didn't share the thing, but there are other books. We have lots of books about raptors, and so here's, people are asking about gold eagles. I haven't even read this, but looks like it's out west.
You remember
Behavior of the golden eagle.
Well, 3 years ago, there was a golden up by the Echo Trail, I think this side of Bass Lake, actually. And I went up there, there were cars all over on the Echo Trail, I never seen anything like it.
So nobody really asked me, how do you know that it's not an immature bald eagle? Immature bald eagles, before they get a white head, at one place, I mean, they can really be really blotchy with white underneath, kind of all over. But the area that stays white, even when they're almost all dark, is their armpits. And a golden eagle at any stage in its life, doesn't have, the only place it's going to have white on the underside is patches on the wing. And so, so what you're seeing doesn't have that, and it looks big and dark. And it's probably a bald eagle. Bald eagles tend to have a lot of white, dispersed white underneath them until they start getting a white head. I always look to the armpits.
Bill, you didn't mention about going to the dump. I went to the dump in Virginia, and I mean, there were hundreds of eagles flying around, and I thought they also said there were golden there. The big dump. I can't remember what I was getting rid of.
I don't know who to trust when people tell me that.
Right. Well, I went there. I took photos. I mean, there are hundreds of eagles all over the place. But it looked, yeah.
Golden.
I believe there was a golden one. I deleted the pictures, but that's they told me.
Immature golden?
I don't recall now. It was about a year ago. I was just totally shocked. You know, it's shock memory loss.
I mean, that's just the value of my opportunity to go down and do that every year. And it's amazing to me when I'm watching, you know, even golden eagles that are soaring up.
How many do you count on there?
So high, huh?
How many do you normally count?
Not very many, 6 maybe. So usually it's like 2 or 3 pairs, or sometimes an immature. Mostly I see adults, but and I'm almost all the bald eagles are down towards the river, and so I see some bald eagles away from it, but unless there's like I said, somebody's got a chicken farm or something that's dumping dead chickens out or something, then you see a lot of bald eagles around there. But that's what it is. So I hope Scott will get to come up sometime. I would have, if there hadn't been other things going on, I would have considered going down to either when Sibley was there. That would have been interesting. You've never been there.